Those were the exact words that came out of my mother's mouth, repeated so many times that they became a kind of cruel mantra in my head. She said them with the nonchalance of someone commenting on the weather, as if they were an obvious fact of the universe. Me. I learned to take a deep breath and smile because complaining only made me even more invisible. My name is Megan, and this is the story of how the woman who was supposed to love me unconditionally made sure to remind me every day that I was a mistake. But when life put everything at stake, she had no choice. Since I was little, I knew exactly who the star of the house was. Logan. Tall, charismatic, smart, perfect in everyone's eyes, but especially in hers, Cheryl, my mother. She said he was born to shine, that he had something special. Me. I was difficult, complicated, too sensitive. Before we continue with the story, I ask you to like the video and subscribe to the channel. This is very important to us. Thank you so much. I remember Logan's 9th birthday. He got a superhero party with a 3-tier cake, an entertainer dressed as Captain America, and presents that filled an entire room. On my birthday 2 months later, she gave me a used hardcover notebook with a ripped-off label and the phrase, "For you to write your things in." Without wrapping paper. Without a candle. Without congratulations. At school the differences continued. When I scored a 9 in math, she said it was the least. When Logan scored a 7, she would say that he was tired, that boys mature later. You need to be understanding, Megan. He's just a boy. Over time I stopped trying to please her. I was always locked up in my room reading, drawing, creating a world in which I was heard, because in reality no one listened. To be fair, Logan was never cruel to me. But he also never stood between me and our mother's injustices. He silently accepted his privileges. And deep down that was even more painful. When I was 16, she called me in for a serious talk. She said that I needed to start working to help at home, since money was tight, and your brother needs to focus on his studies. I took on 3 part-time jobs, a morning shift at a cafe, an afternoon at a clothing store, and tutoring classes at night. And him? He played video games and attended a prep course in an air-conditioned room. The day I left home was silent. There was no fight, no tears. Just a small suitcase and a note. "Thanks for everything. Take care. Megan." She never answered. Never called me. Never asked where I was. I managed on my own. I worked as a waitress, lived in dilapidated shared apartments, studied by candlelight when the bills were late. I entered a public university, completed an internship, and landed a steady job in a laboratory. It wasn't much, but it was mine. For the first time I could breathe without having to ask for permission. 7 years went by like that. 7 years without a single phone call from my mother. The only news I received was through Logan's social media. He had become a lawyer, gone on an exchange program, bought an imported car. Always with the caption, "Mommy's pride." Then one ordinary morning my cell phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello. Is this Megan? This is Memorial Hospital. Mrs. Cheryl has been admitted in critical condition. She needs urgent family evaluation." I froze. I didn't ask for details. I didn't cry. I just hung up, sat on my bed, and stared into the void for a few minutes. Part of me wanted to ignore it. Pretend I hadn't heard. But the other part, the part that, as painful as it was, still sought some dignity, grabbed a change of clothes, threw it into my backpack, and left. I caught the first bus and arrived at the hospital hours later. There she was. Pale, fragile, connected to tubes and machines. The face of someone who always seemed invincible, now looked so human it made me angry. The doctor called me aside for a private conversation. "Your mother has a severe bone marrow failure. We urgently need a transplant." "And Logan?" I asked. He sighed. "We did the test. He is not compatible. You are the only 100% match so far." I fell silent. My eyes didn't fill with tears. My heart didn't race. I only felt a strange calm. I returned to the room and she looked at me with surprise. As if she hadn't expected me. "You came. Family was called." She closed her eyes. Breathed deeply. When she opened them again, she said with that coldness that had shaped my whole life, "Then do what you were born to do, be useful." In that moment I realized. Not even death was enough to break Cheryl's pride. But there was something she didn't know. Now the one who had a choice was me. Her phrase kept echoing in my head like a rusty needle. "Then do what you were born to do, be useful." I had just heard those words from my own mother, Cheryl, while she was connected to machines, depending on a bone marrow transplant to survive. Yet even death couldn't tame her disdain for me. I walked back into the corridor with steady steps, but my chest was exploding inside. The nurse saw me and tried to smile. "The doctor needs your response, Megan." "I know. Just give me a moment." I sat on a reception bench. The floor seemed to spin. Not because of the hospital or the news, but because of all the memories that came flooding back, like a silent and cruel avalanche. I remembered the punishments I received for things Logan did. The times I cried with a high fever and she sent me to sleep because there was no time for drama. The school meetings she never attended, yet made sure to appear at every one of my brother's ballet performances. Yes, he did ballet when he was little. She used to say it was important for posture, that an artist can do anything. When I wanted to do theater, she said, "Having one dreamy child is enough. Someone needs to keep their feet on the ground." It was around that time that I started saving the change from buying bread to purchase used notebooks, in which I wrote my plays, my ideas, my dreams. He never read them. She didn't even know they existed. I knew that if I showed them, she would tear them apart without even glancing. "Does she have any chance without the transplant?" I asked the doctor later. He shook his head sadly. "Very little. And time is against her. The longer we wait, the smaller the chances." The irony was suffocating. The only person capable of saving her was precisely the one she had spent her entire life trying to extinguish. I returned to the hotel, a small, quiet room. I opened my backpack, took out my cell phone and stared at the screen for minutes. So many times I had wished that she would look for me. That she would say, "I'm sorry. I miss you. I'm proud of you." But now that her world was crumbling, she still saw me as a tool. Never as a daughter. I knocked on the door of the room next door where Logan was staying. He answered wearing a t-shirt and sweatshirt, his eyes downcast. "We need to talk." He made room and let me in. His room was bigger, of course. He always had the best. "Look, Megan," he began. "No. Now it's my turn to speak." I sat on his armchair and looked him in the eyes. The perfect son. The symbol of everything I was never allowed to be. "Did you know that she never took me to the doctor when I had pneumonia? I was 13. I stayed in bed for days. The only thing she said was, 'You'll manage. You're strong.'" Logan lowered his eyes. "Did you know that I used to eat the leftovers from your plate because she said there wasn't enough money to buy food for two?" "Yeah." "Did you know that she forbade me from doing an exchange program even with a full scholarship because the house would be too empty without you?" He ran his hand through his hair, nervous. "I had no idea. She painted me as the rebellious brother, not as the favored one." "Of course you had no idea. You lived in the spotlight." I cleaned the floor after the show ended. He took a deep breath. "Are you going to do the transplant?" I thought for a second. "I will. But not for her. For me. Because I refuse to carry the guilt for someone's death. Even if that someone never loved me. I won't become what she was to me." Logan nodded, visibly moved. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. Just do one thing. See everything you pretended not to see your whole life." The next morning I signed the papers for the procedure. They ran the tests, confirmed the match. And while I was preparing physically for the process, I felt emotionally exhausted. A nurse appeared with an envelope. "This came for you." She said she had to deliver it before the procedure. It was a letter. Handwritten. Cheryl's handwriting was firm even while she was sick. "Megan, I never knew how to love you the right way. When you were born, I was broken, alone, and full of fear. And you reminded me of all that. Your brother was my shield. You were my mirror. I made so many mistakes I don't even know how to ask for forgiveness. But if today you're here doing what no bought love could ever do, then maybe, just maybe, you are everything I never managed to be. I don't expect forgiveness. But I wanted you to know. I saw you. Too late, perhaps. But I saw you. Cheryl." I finished reading and closed my eyes. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I only felt a strange relief. Because finally, for the first time, she saw me. I reread my mother's letter so many times that its words began to lose shape that morning. Even so, their weight still remained. For the first time, Cheryl had written something that wasn't a disguised criticism or a reminder that I was a mistake. She never openly asked for forgiveness, but confessed what had never been said. She had projected upon me all the pain that she herself never knew how to heal. The procedure was scheduled for the following day. The medical team explained the risks, the side effects, the care I would have to take afterward. Everything was technical, rational, as if my body were being used as a bridge between the life and the death of someone who, until then, had only dug holes inside me. But there was a strange peace in my chest. Perhaps because for the first time I was acting by choice. Not out of obligation, not out of fear, not to please anyone. I was taking control of the narrative. And that gave me strength. On the day of the transplant, Logan appeared very early in the room where I was waiting for the team. He looked serious. Without his usual charm, without his rehearsed words. "Can I come in?" I nodded. "I read her letter," he said, sitting beside me. "She showed me a copy last night." And he was silent for a moment. I thought I knew what it meant to be her son. But I only knew the version she showed me. "I never imagined that she had been so harsh with you. Because you didn't want to think. It was easier to believe I was exaggerating, ungrateful, dramatic." He nodded without defending himself. I was a coward. It was the first time Logan admitted that. The first time I saw genuine recognition in his eyes. No disguised guilt. No minimizing of my pain. "You were complicit," I corrected. "And the silence of someone who watches is as cruel as the act of someone who hurts." "I know. And there's nothing I can say that will change that. But I wanted you to know that. I'm here. If you want to hate me, I understand. But if you ever want to try to rebuild, I'm willing to start from zero." I took a deep breath. Let's see what remains of me after this. He stayed a little longer and then left, leaving the room silent again. A silence that for the first time didn't bother me. Hours later, the transplant was performed. It was exhausting. Painful in parts. But the hardest part was the emptiness that remained afterward. A kind of emotional exhaustion that has no remedy. A mixture of relief, sadness, and something akin to compassion for a woman who denied me everything, except the chance to finally close that cycle. In the following days, my recovery was slow. I experienced nausea, dizziness, extreme fatigue. The medical team was impeccable, but what sustained me the most were my brother's quiet visits. He didn't bring flowers or balloons. He brought juice, salty crackers, and books that he thought I might like. For the first time, he was trying to know who I was. And not who our mother said I was. Cheryl was also recovering. More slowly but alive. I was informed that her body was accepting the marrow well. And with that she would have a second chance at life. What would she do with it? I didn't know. But the choice was hers, just as mine was whether to donate or not. On the afternoon of the 5th day, the doctor told me that she wanted to see me. I took hours to decide whether to go. Part of me thought that the letter was enough. But another part wanted to see with my own eyes if there was any truth in that sheet of paper. When I entered the room, she slowly turned her face toward me. Her eyes were sunken, her face pale, her body still fragile. But there was something new there. It was hard to explain. "You came." "I did." She swallowed hard. "I didn't think you'd have the courage to look me in the eyes after everything I wrote. Writing is easy. It's hard to look into the eyes of someone you ignored your whole life." She nodded. And for the first time I saw Cheryl shrink. Human. Unarmed. "I destroyed everything that was between us, didn't I?" "No. You just ignored that there was something." She took a deep breath. "Why did you do it? After everything?" "Because I'm not like you. Because I am better. And because I didn't want to carry the death of anyone, not even yours, on my shoulders." She nodded and a solitary tear rolled down. "I know it's too late. But if I could go back, I'd do everything differently. But you can't. So the only thing you can do now is not repeat it." She looked at me with wet eyes. "Do you forgive me?" I took a deep breath. The question burned like salt on an open wound. "Not today. And maybe not tomorrow. But who knows, one day." Then I turned away. Not out of disdain. But by decision. Because at that moment I had something I never had with her. Freedom. I left my mother's room with calm yet firm steps. I didn't feel anger. Nor pity. What I felt was something new, almost strange. Peace. For the first time, I wasn't trying to prove anything. I wasn't seeking her gaze, nor begging for recognition. I had done my part. And now the life she chose to lead from that point on was solely hers. I returned to the recovery room and looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were deep, my face pale. But inside me something was pulsing. Strength. Not that strength which comes from silent resistance, but the strength of someone who has been liberated. Of someone who survived. Not only the procedure but a whole life of being cast aside. In the following days I was discharged and returned to my city. No grand farewells. Logan hugged me before I left. Thank you for everything, Megan. Truly. Take care of her. I will. There was something different in his eyes as well. Perhaps the beginning of a brother. Perhaps the end of a silence. I arrived home and went straight to the balcony of my small apartment. The morning sun shone on the planters I had nurtured myself. Mint, basil, lavender. Simple things that reminded me I could make life flourish even with wounded roots. I sat with a cup of tea in my hands and took a deep breath. For the first time I thought of myself without dwelling on the past. Without hearing Cheryl's voice saying that I wasn't enough. Without comparing myself to Logan's untouchable shine. Without bearing the weight of proving my worth to someone who never wanted to see it. I opened my laptop and wrote at the top of a new page. My story begins now. And indeed it began. A few weeks later I published an article about the emotional process of donating bone marrow to an abusive relative. It wasn't technical. It was human. I spoke about love, boundaries, and about the kind of strength that doesn't show up in blood tests. The text went viral. I was invited to give a lecture at a conference on health and family relationships. In the audience people cried. They came to hug me. They thanked me. For the first time my pain became a bridge, not a prison. Cheryl sent me a message that day. I read your text. It hurt. But I understand. Thank you for doing that for you. I'm trying to change. I didn't reply. Not out of anger. But because sometimes silence is also an answer. And because not every cycle needs to be mended. Sometimes true forgiveness is leaving the other person in the place they built. And moving on. Logan, on the other hand, began to keep in touch. In a light way. Without haste. An article he found interesting, a childhood memory, a sincere question about me. What's your favorite movie? He once sent. And I laughed. Because my own brother never knew that. Little Miss Sunshine. I replied. Of course, he wrote. The girl who shines even when people try to turn her off. Maybe we will never be siblings in the traditional sense. But something new had emerged. Respect. Genuine curiosity. And that was enough. The last time I saw my mother was months later. I was giving a lecture in another city and she appeared. She sat in the last row. She didn't say anything. Just listened. Occasionally she would note something in her notebook. At the end, as everyone applauded, she slowly stood up, hesitated, and left silently. It was for the best. I no longer needed her approval. The version of me who stepped on that stage was no longer the girl begging to be seen. It was the woman who had learned to see herself. To choose herself. To love herself. That day when I returned to the hotel I looked in the mirror once again. But now with different eyes. I saw a survivor. A rebuilt person. The author of my own story. I closed my eyes and whispered. You are not the remainder. You are the beginning. What did you think of this story of revenge and justice? Leave your rating from 0 to 10 in the comments and tell me which moment was your favorite. Would you have done something differently? Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and don't miss any of our stories full of twists and impactful endings.